Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is the author of the memoir When I Stopped Fighting, The Unexpected Joy of Getting My Head Out of My Ass, which is about his battle to get sober, and he hosts the podcast When I Stopped Fighting, the podcast. Prior to becoming an author and podcaster, he worked in a variety of blue-collar and white-collar jobs. His name is Daryl Dittmer, and here's my interview with Daryl. Daryl Dittmer, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you so much for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Prior to becoming an author, you worked in a variety of both blue-collar and white-collar jobs. What were some of the various professions you worked in before writing your first book?
Well, going way back, I started off as a farmhand when I was a kid, and spent several years, summers and some winters doing that, which was a great way to start. I've been a carpenter, and I still dabble in a pretty fair amount of carpentry. Done some home rehabs, done some building. I've been a salesperson in various professions in terms of sales, selling different things over the years. I spent probably most of my career in the risk management realm. I have, let's see, what else have I done? Probably remind me. It's been quite a few things. Let's see, the home rehabs, the sales, a lot of stuff. I've been a business owner. Oh, we actually owned a restaurant. So owned or been part owner in several businesses, real estate ventures, landlord, a number of different things. It's been quite an interesting ride from a profession perspective.
Is there anything in common that made you successful in both blue-collar and white-collar professions?
There is. I would say that perseverance and work ethic probably been the two most important things that I've carried with me. And I was raised in the Midwest in Michigan, actually, and was born with, or at least I was given the Protestant work ethic as an option, or probably the only option in my life. So the work ethic came early, and that was instilled in me early. And then perseverance, I would say, is something I needed to learn as I continued to try new things and fail. I needed to learn how to persevere. So those are two threads that have been woven throughout the entire process.
Without spoiling too much of your memoir, When I Stopped Fighting, what is it about?
It's about my story, and it's about my journey, addiction, dysfunction, recovery, taking risks, freedom. It's about coming from fairly humble and sometimes tumultuous beginnings to a life that quite honestly I never would have dreamed of being so fortunate to have. It's about failing and succeeding, winning and losing, and the lessons learned.
How did you get addicted? How did you become sober? And how did becoming sober change your life?
I became addicted, and that I didn't start that way. I think there's a lot of experimentation when we're young, and that was something that I did, and like a lot of kids do. And I started, and my first drink was when I was 13, but I absolutely loved what happened and the feeling that I had when I took that first drink. And I wouldn't say that I got drunk, but I definitely got, I guess what we used to call buzzed. And it really just escalated from there. I wanted to do that more often. I wanted to do it a lot. I got involved in other drugs, various other drugs, and some fairly hard drugs over the course of time. And I got to a point in my life where that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do anything else with my life. The next drink or the next drug was my focal point. So I got sober, and that was through more or less an intervention, and that has, that's one aspect of change, in terms of whether we're sober or whether we're not sober. Getting sober is the first step to being able to change to a different way of living and a different way of being and life. And I was fortunate that I was 19 when I got sober. So I didn't have a clue, which end was up in life in general, but I didn't have a clue how to be sober or improve or change or anything like that. So the first step was sobriety. And then from that point, I've been working on myself and my life in order to continue to change and be better as a human being on this planet for myself and for others. And it's an ongoing process. It continues to this day. So, and I don't anticipate it ever ending.
How do you feel you can help others at this point in your journey?
I feel I can help others through my experiences and sharing my experiences, and that was the reason that I wrote my book. I've helped sober, non-sober people to the extent that I can, but there's a lot of people in this world who don't have issues with drugs or alcohol or drinking or anything like that, and they're sometimes they struggle with this thing called life. And so I feel that through my experiences, most of which have been life at this point, I've been sober a long time. I've been sober almost 40 years. And so it's just become life. And so I'm able to share my experiences, and whether it's business or whether it's, just making myself a better person, and sharing how I did that through exploring and learning and trying and failing. Sharing those experiences, I think, is an extremely important component of helping others, because I don't think I help others, at least for me, by telling them what to do. I can help others by sharing my experiences of what worked and what didn't work for me, and not so that people can necessarily learn from my experiences, but they can recognize when they might be having a similar experience, and potentially provide some direction, or at least some relatability.
What made you decide to write and publish your story?
Well, I was I didn't get married until I was about 20 years past my drinking and drug issues, and my wife at that time, as I was relating one of my stories, of my youth and some of the dysfunction, she said, I just can't see it. I don't see you being that person. I don't get it. And I said to her, I said, well, remind me to write a book someday. And because I want you to get it, and I want other people to get it. And so that was sort of the catalyst for me writing the book. And then as I've got a couple of sons, and as I've seen them get older and, watch them grow, I wanted them to have something that they could read and refer to and potentially relate to, that might help them with their lives. And that and just an outreach in terms of, being potentially in a position to help others through my experiences are all reasons why I shared my story.
How much of a learning curve was there for you when you wrote your first book?
A big learning curve. It's weird because the writing part was not difficult for me, and I guess I liken that to, you know it's coming out of me. So what I was writing about was just coming out of me, and the more I wrote, the more was able to come out of me, to be honest, it took me about somewhere between 2 and 3 months to write the first book once I sat down and started. And then within 5 months, I had written 2 books. So it just poured out of me. But the learning curve for me was the editing part, the formatting part, the cover part. And I had some help from a place that helps authors self-publish, which was great. And so that was very, very useful to me. And now the second book, I'm actually doing that process more or less myself. So the learning curve is steep, and I didn't know what I didn't know, but I love learning new things. So it's been a great process.
The audio book version of your book recently became available to listen to. What was producing the audiobook version of your book like?
That was another very interesting journey. I've been told by people in my life that I have a decent voice for that sort of thing, but I didn't have the confidence. So I wasn't sure that I could, put something out there that was as good as I would like it to be, and that people would listen to it and want to listen to it. And so that was an interesting journey. And I found a group that if I did the recording, they would help me with the editing and that sort of thing. And so that was very, very helpful. I didn't edit it myself because I just wouldn't have had a clue how to do that. So it was cool. I enjoyed it, and I've had some feedback on it, and people have also liked it. So I'm grateful for that fact as well.
Now, is your book "When I Stopped Fighting" is that self-published, traditionally published, or hybrid published?
Well, I guess hybrid. If there was a group that helped me publish it, and so they put it up on Amazon and that sort of thing, and they helped with the cover and the formatting, and I did the outside went to do the editing and that kind of thing. So I guess hybrid is probably the right answer.
Are there more books from you on the horizon? And if so, could you give us a preview of any books you may or will write?
Sure. Yes. I had a second book that I've written really as sort of an extension of my first book. So my first book, When I Stopped Fighting, is my story and my journey. And then I wrote my second book, which is called When You Stop Fighting, as an adjunct and an extension of that, to more or less expand and share more of my journey, but also to help other people understand, what their trajectory is, and take maybe a closer look at their own journey. And if they're struggling, I think it helps by relating again many of the stories that I went through, and some of the travails that I went through in my life since becoming sober. So the first book is more of my story of getting sober and moving through some of that, and then the second book is really geared toward other folks, to help other people stop the fight that can be pervasive in their lives.
You host a podcast called When I Stop Fighting the Podcast. What can listeners expect from a typical episode of your podcast?
Well, I started that podcast, and most of what I've done so far has been just short videos, which allow people to understand me, understand some of the things that I think about, ruminate about, and try to live by to improve myself. And some of those are very short. They're anywhere between probably a couple minutes and 8 minutes. So I'm actually recording my first longer podcast today with a guest, and that one's going to be actually, he has also written a book that I've read, and we're going to talk a little bit about his book. We're going to talk a little bit about the fighting that can be inherent in our lives, and kind of run that thread through our discussion. So as that rolls out over time, When I Stop Fighting, the podcast will be about our fight with ourselves, and how we can stop ourselves, and then in addition to that, how we can stop fighting ourselves. So that's what it's going to be, and I really look forward to getting that out there on a consistent basis. So stay tuned.
Can those who recognize that a loved one is struggling with addiction help said loved one become sober, and if so, how?
They can. I was hit with an intervention, when I was young, and so it allowed me for a moment to have some honesty with myself about, not as much about the drinking and the drugs, maybe to an extent, but more just how my life was going and where I was headed at that point, which was completely downhill. So that helped me by giving me just a glimpse of something different. And then I went into a drug and alcohol treatment center that was inpatient for a month. So can it help? Absolutely, by interventions and that sort of thing. But I would caution, when we try to help others, if they're not ready to accept help and not ready to be helped, it can be very frustrating and very difficult. And so, there are programs to help people who live with folks that might be addicted or struggling with those kinds of issues, to allow us to be the best person we can be for when that person actually decides that they want to be helped. So I like to liken it to, when we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, we'll ask for help, or we'll be open to help. And I think that needs to be true for most people before they accept that they need to change.
Daryl, thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus. You were an amazing guest.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Very much appreciate your time and the questions and the discussion. So thank you.
It's always insightful to interview people who have become sober after being addicted. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.